pass it to a nonprofit, say a Promise Neighborhood or Operation Unite, and they can conduct practice tests. So that's probably where we will find ourselves when we start asking questions about civil service to the state. Okay.
Bill, those are regular. They're readily available online. Police tutorial services have multiple practice tests that anybody can take. So again, that's getting out to the community that needs to know this information, where they can find these. And it's practice tests, it's questions, it's what to expect on civil service tests.
And Sheriff, is it correct that you had said that the tutorials do cost money, so maybe a not-for-profit could help fund that?
That is correct.
So we could work with a not-for-profit to help fund it.
That is correct.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, next question. Sure.
It's just about encouraging youth in your community to pursue careers in law enforcement. How do we do that?
Sheriff, give us your thoughts if you have any, and then we'll have the committee go down if people have ideas. I do have some ideas, but we'll hear from you first, sir.
Mm-hmm. Again, we get out to community days, we speak to the kids. Every single school resource deputy deals with the children every single day, and they're loved in their schools. They're talking to their children, that people are coming in and saying, hey, how do I become a police officer someday? We had a Explorer post for many years here, and it kind of went by the wayside due to lack of kids wanting to be involved. Let's face it right now, law enforcement isn't a real glorified place to come and work. And we've got some great police officers here in Columbia County with the City of Hudson Police Department and all the part-time PDs, the state police, the sheriff's office. And, it's tough. So this is why we're sitting here. But we do get out. We do talk to the kids. I'd love to get the Explorer post going back again, but that comes down to budget stuff too. It comes down to overtime with deputies being here at night, working with the children. And the Explorer post is associated with the Boy Scouts with Twin River Council. And there's training and everything that the deputies have to go through to be part of that program.
Okay, great, Sheriff. Thank you. Supervisor Mia. You're muted.
Abdus, you need to take yourself off mute. There we go. Thank you.
I like to say Sheriff Department can make a flyer, go to the all city hall. We are looking for minority hiring, and go to the all like a Bleach Tower, Hudson Islamic Center, all of the area like a minority people are connection with that. So they can see that they can see the Sheriff Department hiring, and they can have a contact person. They can do that all how we can hiring, how we need to do that. Write down. They have a somebody should be. They can contact and they can give it the guideline. I think so. That's the important to the encouraging the minority community. That is my idea.
Thank you so much, Supervisor Mia. So there was another supervisor before Mayor Johnson. I don't see the hand, but I know I saw it.
Me. It was Supervisor Holding. Hi. Is it Kevin Marchetto? Am I saying that correctly? Marchetto? Anyway, Kevin, you said, what was your last name? How do you say it?
Marchetto.
Okay. Mr. Marchetto had a great idea when he talked about recruiters and people dedicated to recruitment. And one thing he mentioned that I hadn't thought of before was offering bonuses or paying off college debt. So when I think of our young people, I think of the tremendous college debt that we all carry. And I'm wondering, again, it would take some finances, but I'm wondering, just like the Army recruits a lot of people by offering free college, free higher education, if maybe that wouldn't be an opportunity, or Sheriff Bartlett, maybe even some of your part-time people offering some kind of program where while they're in college getting their degree, they could also be part-time working for the sheriff's office and somehow offset some of their college expenses. That might be something to look into.
Sounds
I mean,
good.
that's a great idea. But again, my budget was cut over $1 million this year. So it all comes down to dollars and cents. And another thing too, as far as recruiting, and we're talking about the younger kids now and coming into law enforcement, civil service exams are run roughly once every 4 years, unless they exhaust the list. If they exhaust the list, then of course it's run again. I run into that in the jail over in the corrections facility, because when we have the jail tests, 9 people will take the test. And then so the list is exhausted within a year, and they have to have it again. So maybe somebody right now who might be interested, they may not be interested in 4 years now. So whether, again, coming back to civil service, whether they move the tests up so it's once every couple of years, or civil service question again.
And maybe that dictates the timing of our kind of push, like Supervisor Mia was talking about, getting out to the town halls, getting out around and advertising. Maybe we aim to do that 6 months before that next civil service exam to get a big amount of people taking it.
Yeah, great ideas. So we had Mayor Johnson next, and then after that, Mr. Marquetto.
Yeah, one of the things I would like to see is officers partnering more with the local not-for-profits. And I think when you interact with the youth in school, it's a different interaction than you're going to get when it's not so structured and you can have a real conversation with the youth. And I know the SROs are loved, and they do an amazing job, both of the ones that I've had interactions with. But when you see youth outside of that school element, that's when you really get to feel why there might not be minorities taking these tests, and you get to hear from them why there's such a distrust in policing. And that's not something that's just Columbia County specific, it's just cultural. But until you come out of that, those boundaries and come out of your comfort zone, then we're going to keep running into the same issue.
Great.
Can I speak to that for a second, Bill?
Sure.
I was a youth director for 16 years in the town of Chatham, and we had programs every year with the sheriff's department, and also the village police department would come down and do some things with our kids. But there used to be a lot of funding for programs back in 2000, early 2000 to probably about 2012, which helped pay for a lot of those programs. But they would come to our 6-week, 8-week camp programs every year, and it was great. They used to work with us on Sean's Run every year, which is now going to be no longer. But for 20 years, that event happened, and the sheriff's department had a big presence there. But they used to do a lot of outreach, especially at the Morris Memorial, the youth center. I had a lot of street kids. I had a lot of kids that had some drug issues, things like that we would all work together on.
During the summer,
I participated in all of those events as the youth director, and they're very helpful. But I think for all of the officers that we have, and see some of the officers on here right now, a lot of you guys had a mentor who you looked up to in law enforcement, and you can call and go to for anything. Some of our kids, they don't have that because there's this distrust in law enforcement. So if we're able to build that bridge, I think that helps out a lot in getting young minorities to take the test and to want to be officers.
Sheriff, and then Mr. Marquetto.
Just to reiterate on the academy this year, I usually, when I started as chief, I would get 30, 40 applications for the academy. This year I had none, 0. I had no one to sponsor for the academy before it closed. And I don't know if Sheriff Bartlett's applications dropped also, but it was substantial. I was shocked. I mean, I used to spend hours upon hours reviewing resumes, and it's not happening anymore. Maybe some incentive. The academy costs the average recruit out of his own pocket between $5,000 and $7,000, and maybe that's something our other committees can help at. I don't know if that's a hindrance to them anymore. It's a good chunk of change, there's no doubt. And as far as some other recruiting, we do a lot of speaking over to Questar 3. They have a nice criminal justice program going over there. And we're always welcome there. I know the sheriff goes over there and speaks, and but it's another avenue that we should look at.
So you guys are all bringing up some wonderful points, and I want to go back to something that the mayor said about mentors, which is why, Mayor, I was talking to Greg Mosley and Marcus, because these are two individuals who rose up to the pinnacle of state police, and both of them ran the diversity division for the state police. They are talking about, even pre all of this that we're doing, they were talking about putting together a mentor type program with a lot of the minority officers in and around the community, and how we can weave that in and take advantage of that. I think is a discussion that should certainly be had. And also, Greg Mosley mentioned to me about the guardians of the state police who do recruiting, not only for state police, but for communities as well. And they're also an organization that focuses on diversity. So these are, again, some of the conversations that have been had, and I'm trying to weed them into our discussions here, because I think they would be very valuable. But I think the mayor had a great point, because the civil service test is one step, but you first have to convince somebody that they even want to take the civil service test or want to be in law enforcement. And what we found, it wasn't the low pay or any of that deterred people. It was the fact that you have people in the minority community that really never saw a cop. They don't know what it takes to actually get into law enforcement. We, just like with nursing, we think if you teach people in the minority community what it takes to become officers, you will start to see a lot of high quality candidates come your way. If you could, next question, Sherry.
Can I add one last thing before we move on?
Absolutely.
One thing we also had to take into account is that in minority communities, police are not always viewed as the good guys. So when they're arresting, somebody who's committing a crime, that person, that criminal is somebody's dad or somebody's mom. So kids are looking at police as the person who broke up their family, because they're not yet understanding that a crime was committed. And that's why, like, in kindergarten, you ask a classroom, what do you want to be? They all say a police officer, fireman, all of the top jobs. By 7th grade, when you ask that same question, police officer goes from number 1 all the way to you barely hear anybody say it unless it's someone who comes from a family of police. And that changes because a lack of interaction. And most people interact with the police from their city. So they don't really interact with the sheriff. They don't really understand what they do. So they see a badge and every cop just seems the same.
Yeah. Thank you for that, Mayor. Next question, Sherry.
Okay. Sorry about that. Somebody was emailing me. What actions can your agency take to foster the continued development, retention of diverse officers?
Sheriff, do you have once we have officers on board, what actions could your agency take to retain them?
I'm proud to say we've retained everybody. Again, it comes down to money. The reason we do lose officers, they go to the state police. They make a lot more money than we do.
Yeah.
You're getting somebody coming out of the state police academy. They make a lot more money than we do. I'll leave it at that. And that's why we lose them. Any of the minorities that we do have here, I'm thankful that they haven't left. I've got some great guys and girls, and they've made it their career to stay here, but money, they leave for higher paying jobs.
So I will say one point to that is that what we found when we were doing the Zone 14 is It is not required to take the civil service test to get into Zone 14. Um, and I would encourage us, as we're talking about all of this, we may not, the people that we train, you may not hire all of or any of them that go into this program, but your participation would certainly help, Sheriff. But for us, at least for me, the importance is getting young minorities trained on how to become a police officer, which you could have a big role in, and maybe getting people into the Zone 14. But it is not a civil service, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it is not required to take civil service tests to get into Zone 14.
That's correct, Bill, and that's an awesome point. But like Chief Marchetto just said, he used to review 20 or 30 applicants. Same with us. I used to have a stack of applicants like this to go to Zone 14. And you do not, anybody listening on the YouTube channel, you do not have to be on the civil service test to go to our local academy at the college. It does cost money.
Yeah.
Again, Kevin said, the chief said, between 5,000 and 7,000. So this is where maybe these nonprofit can help out and get these people in there. I remember a wonderful photo that we took of a couple of young adults that graduated from Zone 14. They were all minorities, and every single one of them now have been hired, and they have gone on to have great careers. I have one of the gentlemen, HPD has one of the gentlemen, and I believe HPD has one of the young ladies that went on. And, you know, we get them certified. That helps so much getting them out on the street. Go back to rankings of 1 and 2 and 3 on civil service instead of pass fail. If it ever went to that, if we have people that are certified, it makes our job a lot easier to be able to say, hey, you're certified. I don't have to send you to school for how many months and then field training, et cetera, et cetera. You're looking at 6-8 months before I get somebody on the streets. So that's a great idea, Mr. Hughes. I would be more than glad to assist in any way with that.
Excellent. Next question, Sherry.
All right, we go on to training and continuing education. How can you develop officer training programs that reflect your community values and build trust between police officers and the communities they serve?
So, Sheriff, if we could, I want to start at Zone 14 because I believe that's where all the officers start or should start with their training. So what are some things we could do at Zone 14 as far as training? I know diversity is one, but what are some of the other things? And we're going to talk about diversity there.
Yeah, diversity as far as anti-bias training.
That's correct.
I think the overall, you know, we talk about maybe having this committee put in place by the county, by however it's done. And that committee at that point can come up with different types of training that they could say, hey, this would be important to have, A, B, C, D, E. Or maybe bring somebody into the academy that maybe they didn't have a good interaction with a police officer, but something valid. Okay, I'm not saying that it's not valid, but something where they can express their concern to the young officers. Hey, you know, this happened to me. But it's not just a beatdown session. It's somebody giving it from their heart. And the young men and women would think about that and get to hear that. But I think a committee, again, we're talking about maybe putting this committee together with David Harrison said, and it's a great idea. And that's just, you know, that's just a very small part of it in the infancy stages. There's so many things that can happen with that committee, and part of that could be training in the academy and also training here within the sheriff's office and suggestions for us.
So before we get into the department, I want to talk about the still stick with the Zone 14, and I see Sheriff Harris raise his hand. So if you could.
Thanks, Bill. You know, I think with the training, obviously the police academy is the very first part of the training, and you know, Sheriff Bartlett isn't going to be surprised that I say this, but I think it has to be less paramilitary than it is, and
Amen.
I think there has to be more training for police officers to always act professionally and treat everyone with respect, even in the worst situations. And we're seeing, because everybody carries around, the ability to record things now, and we're seeing that, in some situations, police officers are being disrespectful and not acting professionally. And I think that hurts the profession overall, especially when it involves people of diverse cultures. So I'm not sure how that's done. I think maybe, if you bring in mental health professionals or interpersonal communication professionals, then I think that has to be stressed. Even when somebody is yelling and screaming at you and obviously all worked up in a situation that you respond to, that person may take it as, you're attacking their culture rather than, you're just trying to deal with the situation. So if you can treat everyone the same and stress that in the training, I think that's going to help in the long run.
Thank you so much, Sheriff Hare. There was a supervisor that raised her hand. I didn't get, it happened so quick. I didn't get to see the name though.
That was me, Supervisor
Okay.
Hogan. So I think it's multifaceted. I think that for some of these trainings to be effective, people really have to come in with an open mind and an open heart, not being defensive. So many people that I've spoken to, some in law enforcement, and I talk about, implicit racial biases, and they say, I'm not racist. We all hold implicit racial biases. If you take any psychology course, it's how our brains work. It's not necessarily a negative thing or it makes you a bad person, but we have to be aware of the biases we carry, because otherwise we're acting on them without even knowing that we're acting on them. So like the officer that asked, hey, do you have a bomb on you, to the Muslim couple, that's an implicit racial bias that officer holds, thinking that somebody who's Muslim is more likely to have a bomb. I've never been asked if I have a bomb. I'm white. And that is, I'm sure, why that question was asked. And it's not that he meant offense by it. It's not that he was intentionally going in his mind, they're Muslim, they probably have a bomb, I need to ask them. That's why they're implicit racial biases. They're in our narrative. And so I think when we take these trainings and have these conversations, a lot of it is about exposure and openness. So as soon as someone feels like they're being attacked, they're going to get defensive. It's human nature. As soon as you come at me, attacking me with what you think is wrong with me or bad about me or what I need to change, I'm going to go on the defensive. Human nature. So how do we have these conversations with people in law enforcement, especially because they have such power, right? My implicit racial biases might mean that I don't have a conversation with somebody. Somebody else's implicit racial biases in law enforcement might mean that somebody's life is taken or something a lot more serious. And so how do we have these conversations in a way that's not about, you're bad or you're this or you're that, but just about, hey, maybe even take some psychology courses. Maybe we could find an online university that would offer some psychology courses about like how the brain works, and that it's not a bad thing that we have these biases. It's just how the brain works, and being aware of them. You're not necessarily going to get rid of them. They're programmed in your brain. You can't necessarily just change the biases you have, but you can become aware of them, and then you can consciously choose to act not from them, or choose to act in a different way. So when the thought goes through your head, okay, a Muslim person, a bomb, with proper training, you're going to go, wait, that's my implicit racial biases. I'm not actually going to ask that question. And so I think it's really important that we have these trainings in a way, because I know in talking to a lot of people, they're like, oh yeah, we did our training, ha ha ha. I mean, we do it in the town for workplace violence or sexual harassment, and everyone's like, oh yeah, we had to sit through that training. But they're not actually going there to learn about, their behavior or their biases or what they might be holding. And I think part of what we've been talking about tonight that's really important to bring into this is exposure. So when you go into a more diverse community, there is often less biases because people have friends who are of that group, right? Or people people and you like them. And so now you're challenging those biases. Like, wait a minute, I have a friend who's of this demographic and they're really cool. So maybe my judgment about that demographic, my stereotype, is not actually valid. And so having, these cultural diversity committees and actually having members of law enforcement participating in these conversations and not even always having serious conversations, just hanging out and getting to know one another. And now the minority communities are seeing that the sheriff's deputies are really nice people, and vice versa. Maybe we're going to get rid on both sides of those biases of like coming from minority communities. Police are something to fear. Police are the bad guys. That's a bias that they're holding, and the bias that the law enforcement might be holding, that somebody is more apt to criminal behavior, or that somebody is more apt to have a certain thing about them because they're stereotyping. So I think it's really important to have a way of having these conversations that's not attacking or defensive, and that really is just like getting to know each other. And I think that we can do that through some of these committees that we're talking about.
Yeah, thank you so much, Supervisor.
Hey,
The
I'm
mayor,
going to suggest you guys take a break here, one more person maybe.
yeah, I want the mayor to have an opportunity to
Absolutely.
speak on that, because I think he has a touch of the youth in the community and the Black youth, and I think he has some important information that he could add to this.
That'd be great. And then why don't you guys take about 5 minutes, and then you got about 20 more minutes after that till we all come back. Okay?
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
So-
let's just go into a break. I mean, I kind of echoed what Supervisor Hoteling said.
Okay, great. Okay, guys, so what is it, a 5-minute break? No?
Yeah, take 5. That'd be
Okay.
back at 7:10, and then we'll get all back together about 7:30.
All right, thank you.
How's it going?
can share our next question, please?
How can, where are we? How can your training program help officers effectively and safely respond to individuals experiencing mental health crises or struggling with substance abuse? Wait a second, I don't have that one.
Okay, but we'll address it anyway. So,
Okay.
Sheriff? Is Sheriff on? Or,
Yeah, I'm here, Bill.
okay.
Yeah, we work with mental health. We work with Greener Pathway. We've had these agencies come in and actually train and speak to the deputy sheriffs during our in-service training. We have experts come in. It's not just having deputies standing up front or command staff standing up front talking. They're all trained as trainers, but we have the experts come in and work with the deputies on this. So they're seeing a different viewpoint than just a police officer talking.
So do we have any of the committee members that are looking to make a comment on this?
I think we talked about this a lot.
Yeah, we did.
Although this wasn't the whole group, but I think working with mental health, working with, substance abuse programs so that people can be diverted instead of being arrested, potentially get to mental health professional or a bed for treatment.
Yep, I agree. Take the next question off your list, Sherry. Sherry?
Sorry. How can police departments use its training programs to avoid potential bias incidents and build stronger connections with communities of color and vulnerable populations?
Now, this one should spark it. Sheriff.
Yep. We require all of our officers here to go through implicit bias training, mental health training, law enforcement ethics training, and a host more that they have to do. It's required. And if there's an issue down the line where something does happen, if there's more training to be done, we get them more training, or they have to go through that training again. But everything is monitored. It's not just push a button and let something play, or somebody sits in class and they don't pay attention. There are tests at the end of these trainings, and they have to successfully complete that test and pass that test to get the to pass. And it's also all interactive. It's as you go through the some of them are hands-on, some of them are on the computer, but as you go through any of them, everything is interactive. Whether it's again, we've had mental health training where we actually have role players come in and they go through different types of, this is one thing they do in Zone 14, because I've played the role players before, where they sit down and they go over different scenarios. There's other scenarios that we can do. We talk about training. I'm sort of getting off path a little bit here, but we talk about as far as use of force training and whatnot. We actually
Before we go there, Sheriff, because we're going to have a question on that. So if we could stick to I want to stick to the racial thing, because I'm sure there's going to be comments to that.
Yeah, go ahead.
So I saw one supervisor raise her hand. Who was that?
I am.
Abdus.
Okay. Supervisor Mia, go ahead.
Yeah, I have a question, Sheriff Bartlett. You have a routine check. Are you asking this kind of question? This car has a bomb. You asking usually or not?
So if you couldn't understand, Sheriff, what he was asking is it part of your protocol to ask if there's if someone has a bomb in their car?
No.
Okay, that's it. That is the bias. That is part of bias, because telling you that I'm Muslim. So I know Mr. Bartlett working with me and Hudson Islamic Center. Very good. I'm excellent. Appreciated his job. But that point is biased, and it is Actually, I don't want to say that I'm the witness lot of we suffering in the hearts of Islam Center suffering and a lot of things, but we don't want to go through. But I believe that Mrs. Hotline, Tistia, I'm agree with her, and I think so. That's police officer need a bias training.
So great points, Supervisor Mia. So, Sheriff, what I will say is I took a good look at your list, and what I didn't see there, which is pretty prominent, is um, racial sensitivity and racial diversity training. And so I would suggest and advise, hope that we would write that into the permanent training of the sheriffs, but more importantly, that these aren't computer programs, that we have interactive, personal interactive, because I think that's the only way that when you're engaging in these kind of programs, you can start to actually get through some of the things that Supervisor Hotel talked about. We're all going to have biases, and that's all of us. But if you get to humanize it, I think it starts to give you a different perspective of how you go about it moving forward. And so I think what Supervisor Hotel said and what Supervisor Mia said, I think is very important.
Yeah, actually, believe it or not, we were on the phone today speaking to a gentleman about getting training like that. You gotta remember, a lot of stuff was affected this year, training
Yep.
wise, because of COVID.
Yep.
So a lot of stuff had to go. Instead of having 15 people in the room, and knock on wood, thank goodness we've been pretty good here with COVID. We've had to protect the officers. We've had to protect the officers' families because we are on the front lines every single day dealing with this. But Bill, we were on the phone today. Exactly what you just said, as far as that training, speaking to an individual, it's hard to come by. But as soon as we can find it, Lieutenant Rivero was actually on the phone speaking to a guy, and we're trying to get it here. And as soon as we can, we're going to have it here.
Okay. Before we go to the next point, Supervisor Mia, if you could make it quick.
Yeah, I'm quick. Thank you, Sheriff Bartlett. I'm honestly, Mr. Bartlett, doing very good job with our Muslim community. I'm appreciated. So, but I think so. Whatever you send the bias training, I think so. You should look at it, this kind of bias in future. That's I expected. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor. Anyone else have any comments on this particular question? Okay, Sherry, next question, please.
How can your police department use its training programs to avoid, where are we? How can your training programs keep officers effectively and safely respond to individuals experiencing mental health crises or struggling with substance abuse?
We exhausted we exhausted that one. So if we could,
Okay.
we talked extensively. Move to the next one.
What practices and procedures can you put in place to measure the quality and efficacy of your department's training programs?
Great question, Sheriff.
Yep, it's some of the stuff we can look at and we can say, yeah, it works. Firearms training, we have a score process there. As far as use of force training and de-escalation of force, I feel it's working because we have not had one use of force complaint to the state of New York. We have to report those if it happens. We haven't had any. Some other trainings are hard to judge and hard to see how they're working out. If anybody has any type of a, program, something that evaluates what the training is doing, I'd love to see it.
Okay, Sheriff Harris.
I just want to say, and Sheriff Bartlett, correct me if I'm wrong, but if this is still the case, but New York State has the New York State Division of Criminal Justice Services that one of their primary goals is to, develop training, update training, assess what training is being provided, and ensuring that the training that they require of police departments and police officers in New York State is current and valid. I'm sure they have ways that they assess it as well. But, I think the police agencies, especially the smaller police agencies, depend heavily on that agency to, come out with the best and current training possible and the best practices for a lot of things, especially with an accredited agency. That's it.
Well, I would. Yeah, thank you, Sarah. I would think that though, the point they're trying to get to, and the mayor, I heard previously in other discussions bring this up, is trying to um, establish through data the success of a particular, or the effectiveness of a particular program. And I don't want to speak for you, Mayor. So if you could speak to that yourself.
Yeah, I mean, I think, reform is all about being proactive instead of reactive. You know, every department could say it doesn't happen here, or we don't do that until it happens. This is about building those safety nets and these training methods so that it never happens, and we can continue to say it doesn't happen here. And the only way to know what's working is to find out how the training is being tested. I've taken a ton of trainings where there's been a quiz at the end, and I couldn't tell you 10 minutes after the training what was on it. I just did enough to get through, answer all the questions correctly, and then there's no test of me in the real world on how I'm using that training. And that's like, what I'm building. And we can do a lot of that through some of the body cam stuff. You can see exactly how officers are interacting, with people in our city, in our county, and, evaluate. People do the same thing with sports. They watch film and they talk about, like, this is, where you went wrong. You should have approached it like this, or you should have said this or done that. And there's lots of opportunities for this to evaluate this type of stuff that doesn't cost money. And I just think we should explore those more.
Excellent points.
Bill, could I speak to this for a moment?
Absolutely.
So a lot of studies they've been doing about, is implicit racial bias training effective? And one of the tools that they use to test that, and I don't know, Sheriff Bartlett, if you have anything like this, or maybe we could implement something, but they use target practice with a video game where, people pop up and it's people of different races, different ethnicities, and they're trying to see what implicit racial biases are there. So am I shooting more quickly at a person of color than a white person? Am I shooting more quickly at a male than a female? And what they do is they do that test before the implicit racial bias training, and then they take the training and then they do it again. And they're measuring, I shot at the people of color 10 times more than the white people. Then I took this training and it went down to 5 times more. Therefore, it was effective. That's going to show you the immediate effect. And then also they'll test it later on to see, is there a lasting long-term effect? Because what has been shown in a lot of these studies is that there's usually an immediate result, but sometimes if they retest it 3 months down the road, we tend to kick back to our old ways. And so one thing they've been showing is that if that training is every 2 months, it's becoming effective. And once you reprogram, then it does become something that you carry with you for the long term. So some of the studies they've shown is there are ways to test it. It's through almost a video game target practice kind of interaction. And then how long does it last? And then do the training again before that time has run out. And after they did it 3 times in a row within that time frame, so they found that 3 months later, people were reverting back to their old ways. So they then did it 3 times in a row every 2 months. And then it was actually long lasting to even years down the road when they were retesting. So I do think there are ways to test the effectiveness of that. And I would love to look into, how to purchase one of those programs. And Sheriff Bartlett, I think you can do that right in-house, as part of the target practice that you probably do anyway, and just test, what that percentage is, do the training, test it again, and just track that data.
So,
The other-
Supervisor
the other-
Bill, if I could
hold on before anybody speaks. I want the sheriff, because I know the sheriff talked extensively about this. So go ahead, Sheriff.
Yeah, thank you. Just before I've got so much going on here before I forget it. Number one, as far as the mayor and he was saying about reviewing video, we do review video. Since I became sheriff, I put in-car cameras in every single patrol car, marked patrol car, out on the streets. I'm currently right now waiting for the Board of Supervisors to authorize the contract for our body cams. And I'm hoping that that's going to be going to the board meeting at the year-end board meeting. Secondly, as far as answering the next question in reference to the video game, our implicit bias training does give you those scenarios that the officers are currently doing. I took it. It gives you different scenarios. And then as far as I don't want to call it a video game. It's a FATS machine. It's the shooting simulator that the college, Columbia Green Community College, invested a lot of money in. COVID shut it down. It's there now. We're ready to use it. That will give you different scenarios. Is there a minority person there? Do they have a gun? Do they have a cell phone? Et cetera, et cetera. So those scenarios absolutely can be reenacted, put them into the simulator and go from there. So we have all that equipment here. We have, again, our bias training. We've been going through that and we've had scenarios that you have to go through in order to pass it. But as soon as we get that FATS machine up and going, we're waiting on COVID. They will also be introduced to that in there.
That's really
The
great.
other-
All right,
So
hey,
hold on,
guys.
guys. Hold on. Hold
The
on.
other group's ready for you guys to come back at 7:30.
Okay.
So close her down and come on over.
All right.
All right, you guys all have the link to get back into the other meeting, okay?
Yep. So
Okay.
thank you guys. It was certainly a great conversation. We certainly appreciate it, and we definitely are going to have more time to go over some of this stuff.
All right, thank you.